everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Pirkei Avos, live from Israel, the Ethics of the Fathers with Rabbi Chaim Coffman. Now, I had a bit of a meltdown before today. I had to get some storage space on my one hard drive, and I lost everything for all my broadcasts in my broadcast software. So I had to rebuild this, so hopefully it looks as good as last week. It's a joy to be with the rabbis. I mean, he's starting Chapter 2, Mishnah 6, Part 2 today. It's going to be exciting, and I so appreciate everything he does, being willing to shine the light of Torah out of Israel. So let's just jump in. Rabbi Coffman, you're live on the air. You've got the classroom, sir.
Always a pleasure to be here. I hope everyone enjoyed their Shabbos, or if you're not Shabbos observant, that's okay, because you don't have to be Shabbos observant anyway. You know, certainly as a non-Jew. But as you said last week, this is going to be a packed Mishnah. So we're going to continue with part 2, where the Mishnah said, and this is where we're holding, because we didn't get that far, which I didn't expect to. And that is that the Mishnah says, he used to say, a boor, right, cannot be fearful of sin. An unlearned person cannot be scrupulously pious, right? That's really the part of the Mishnah we're holding on, and we explain the difference between a boor, someone who's basically just a empty person, you know, never really learned, doesn't have any connection to Torah. So therefore, somebody like that is never going to be fearful of sin, right? They're not going to have the connection. They're not going to have any way to be fearful of sin, because they don't know why they should be. Right, in general. And so whatever, we'll delve into that more. And an unlearned person cannot be scrupulously pious. Now again, we'd say simply, someone who's unlearned, how can he be righteous? He doesn't know, right? How in the world is he going to know what it means to be righteous? So one explanation is that he's not going to have the ability to be righteous, to be pious over here, because that only happens by what? By people steeped in Torah. By people steeped in mitzvahs. Someone who's learning, and they're learning, you know, let's say the relatively high level, they have potential, right? They definitely have potential in order to get there, in order to be someone that is righteous. So, but what happens over here? Even if somebody learns, and somebody has knowledge, as my Rebbe's Rebbe Moshe Schneider, of blessed memory, would say, right? He would tell his students, do not be a frommer student.
Right.
Do not be an ultra-Orthodox student. We don't need students. We need people that hold by Torah and mitzvahs, right? We need people that are going to take the message and they're going to live by it. Now, that doesn't mean that we're all going to be perfect, right? No question about that. What it means, though, is you have to learn, you have to understand what it means, and this is what we say all the time. You have to understand what it means to be a Jew, and then, as difficult as it may seem, you are going to have to implement, right? This is going to be a lot more difficult. You are going to have to implement what you learn.
Sure.
Right? So again, you know, the first thing is I have to understand what to do, right? I have to know what to do. Then I have to put it into practice. Now, if a person learns, we say in the Shema every day, or the paragraph before the Shema, we say every morning, Lilmod, Lamed, Lishmor, Velasot. We say Lilmod, a Jew has an obligation to learn. Lilmod, Ulamed, if they have the ability, they should teach. They should be able to give it over. Lishmor, they should guard the Torah, right? And Lasos, they should keep it. So now, this is what we're saying on a daily basis. Now, not everyone obviously has the ability to give over. You could have people that are unbelievable rabbinic scholars. They just don't have the ability to give over to speak in everyday language for people to understand, right? Because they're much further above us, with their knowledge and their, piousness, so to speak. It's hard. Right? It's hard for them to put into words. It's hard to give over.
Gift, isn't it?
Not everyone has that ability, and it's definitely a gift. And I can tell you, I am trained by nobody except by God himself. right? So why do I say that? Because many
Hard
years
knocks.
ago, many years ago, I started giving some informal classes in the yeshiva, and someone asked me, they said, wow, you give over so much, you're so inspirational. They said, where'd you learn how to teach? And I said, I don't know how to teach. You guys are my guinea pigs, right? So you're right. You teach by obviously, by making mistakes. Certainly by making mistakes. Obviously, you have to have, some sort of goal in mind. There is no point.
Somewhat to say, yes.
We've spoken before, way back when, that, maybe a year ago, maybe more, maybe less, that we said that a person who gives over Torah knowledge and nobody understands what they say, there's no purpose to that.
Right.
In other words, why would it behoove them, a good SAT word, why would it behoove them to give over information if no one in the world is going to understand it, right? If they're so far above other people, right? So over here we got four things, right? We got Lilmod Ulamid. You have an obligation to learn, right? The Jew has an obligation to learn, because if you don't learn, you're never going to know what to do, right? You have an obligation to teach if you have the ability. Now, some people will say, even if you don't know very much, you can still teach, right? You can still give over, right? That is not a question, right? That is definitely not a question. You still have the ability even to give over doesn't matter at what level, right? You could still teach somebody something, right? So that's the second thing. Lishmor v'lasos. Person's got an obligation to guard the Torah. In other words, you have an obligation to do whatever it takes to keep Torah mitzvahs, meaning that you know what the evil inclination wants to do. You know what you're up against in general, so you got to fight the evil inclination. You got to work hard to make fences around the evil inclination, to make sure that you don't transgress. Oh, but you think if you don't transgress, evil inclination is going to sit there and die? I don't think so, right? The more good things we want to do, the more the evil inclination is going to figure out different ways to stop us, right? That's why anyone who ever tries to raise money for Torah institutions, it's harder, right? It's like putting pennies together, right? It's certainly not an easy thing.
No.
Why? Because God wants the people who are, running these institutions to go out in the world, to go out in different places, try and raise the money, and bring people to a higher spiritual level. Now, if God wanted to, he could give them all the money in one shot, right? That's what he does, in the Reform and Conservative movement. They got plenty of money, right?
Wow.
God says, fine, here's $1 billion. Go scram. We don't care. They don't have to work that hard, right? In the Orthodox world, for doing good things, we understand that it's going to be a lot more difficult. Why? Because the evil inclination doesn't want Torah out there. Certainly doesn't want Torah for the nations, right? That is pretty clear. Makes it that much more difficult, right? It comes along, Dan the man working unbelievably hard, all the CG stuff. What happens? An update ruins everything, right? Comes an update, right? Comes an update and puts everything, on the back burner over here, because now you got to dig, and you got to rebuild, right? It's kind of like the Bionic Man, right? You got to rebuild it. He's trying to work hard. He's trying to give over, right? I'm going to give you a big plug here, right? He's trying to help get the word out, and all that. And what does God do? He zaps him.
Oh.
He zaps him like an hour before to know what's the
half
big deal.
an hour.
What's the big deal? All right, I'm cut me some slack here. He said, what's the big deal? I just want to make an update, right? I'm going to update everything. Everything's good. Everything should go normal. And what happens? It takes everything with him, right? They're going to say, why does God want to do that? Right? Why does the evil inclination want to make life difficult? Right? Very simple reason, because he doesn't want the Torah to get out there, right? Certainly, in my case, whether it's worthy of Torah or not, because, you want to hear Coffman speak, go on and yell and scream? Nah, forget it. We're going to make his life difficult, right? You're going to go on Tanakh Talk, you're going to blow up his entire system. Right?
I enjoyed your show this week.
Last week, interesting enough, he told me that, doing the live stream, he heard me in gibberish, couldn't really hear me so well. Some other people, I don't know, sort of garbled a little bit. Other people had no problem, right?
Yeah,
I always say, you got to make your system Kaufman-proof. But why do these things happen, right? Why not just make it easy 100% of the time, right? You go on. You don't have any issues. There are no glitches. I've had this now trying to stream, what do you call it? Zoom on Facebook. So now they changed it a little bit. So whatever, I figured it out on the fly, right? But in general, why not just make it so smooth, right? And this is the answer. Because the evil inclination comes and says, I don't care if you have a good message. I don't care, you're going to yell and scream. You want to inspire people. I'm going to make your life a misery, right? I used to do an email for a list. I put out something on the Parsha, some other things. I send it out to these list of people. One day, I went to send it out, and all of a sudden, I'm missing all my fonts. I'm like, what happened to all these fonts? I see they're in memory, right? I see they're all there, but I can't access them, right? Now you ask when bad things happen to good people. We're going to speak about that this week, right? Suffering hopefully on Tanakh Talk this week, right? But I had all these fonts. They're in the memory. I can't get them out, right? So I'm sitting there trying to do this, trying to do that, right? It took me much longer than it should have. But what happened? I just hit it. I hit all the fonts by mistake, but they were already there, right? So why do we have this aggravation in life, right? In general, everything we do is a test. We've spoken about that. We're going to speak about it in great detail in an hour, depending how fast I can speak and get the information out, right? It may take 2 shows. I don't think so. Probably be able to get out in 1, right? But in the general, when it comes to Torah, when it comes to doing anything spiritual, it's not like the evil inclinations. Okay, you want to be so righteous? Go ahead. We're going to make it so easy, right? We're going to make you get out this message. People are going to love it. Other things are going to happen. You're going to change the world. That's not what the evil inclination wants. The evil inclination wants things to be bad, wants them to be worse, right? Because he knows that the world changes and the world tips the scale, right? He's out of business, right? And that's going to happen within the next 200 years, whether we do it, whether we do all the right thing, and therefore it comes in a peaceful way, or God forbid, it's going to be this major war, right? Gog and Magog, as the prophets talk about, the end of days, right? Former Christians' best, favorite topic of all time, the end of days, right? Because obviously they want to know what the real deal is, other than what they've been spoon-fed by the church, which we understand is not true, right? But the whole point over here is when it comes to something spiritual, when it comes to something of meaning, nothing happens automatically. Nothing happens so easy that, I did this, I did that. Look, everything's a piece of cake. I can tell you in my own life, over the last 30 years, every last thing I've had to do, I've had to fight for. Nothing was handed on a platter. Nothing. Right? So I had to scratch, had to crawl, had to work hard. Okay. And the end result was, that, I survived. But, there are a lot of bumps, tremendous amount of bumps along the way. What do you think? Someone wants to change their life. Someone wants to go in the right way, and God's going to say, you know what? I'm going to make it so easy, right? I'm going to make it no problem. Anyone who's been in the process of conversion, right? Everybody knows things go wrong. Things happen. I had somebody started my classes. First thing happened, within a week, fridge went. Second week, something wrong with the car, right? And then in the same week, there was an issue, I don't know, with the washing machine or something. So the person contacts me frantically, says, Rabbi, did this normally happen with your students who take your classes? I said, yeah, just by you, it happened a little bit earlier.
If it isn't one thing, Rabbi, it's 2.
Exactly. So, but why is this? Why does God make it so hard? There's a Rashi, and at the end of one of the tractates, the Rashi says for a convert to convert, that God makes it almost impossible. He puts this in front of them, that in front of them, other things in front of them. So as my Rebbe once, I said, I don't understand. I said, I understand it has to be hard. I understand we're looking for the cream of the crop. We're not looking for fly-by-nighters. We want people, as I would say in my language, we want the real deal, right? We absolutely want the real deal. Okay, but why hammer them over the head with a sledgehammer on a regular basis? Not just because I yell and scream at them. Not because I just give them mussar. But why do they have it so hard? Why do they have it hard parnasa-wise, right? With livelihood. Why do they have it hard with family? Maybe all of a sudden now there's sickness involved. There are a million things, that go on. So I asked my Rebbe this question, and he said very simple. Anyone who wants to convert, anyone who wants to be the real thing, God is going to squeeze them, right? It's in a similar vein, right? Not exactly the same, but I will say, somewhat a similar vein. Someone who goes to medical school, what happens? First year, 30% are weeded out. Second year, probably another 15%, right? They make it so hard that most people, are going to fall off the face of the map. They can't do it, right? It's just too hard. It's too much pressure. So why they make it so hard? Because they want the cream of the crop, because they want the best. Now, I'm not going to say the fact that a lot of it has to do with memorization, right? That's what it is, and piecing things together. I'm not going to say that's so easy, right? And then you have to apply other things. That's true, right? But they want people who are going to be the cream of the crop. Also, to be able to work under pressure, right? Because, some people are going to be caught where, they have a patient, it's an emergency, they have to come up with an answer, right? They can't crumble over here. They have to keep their wits about them, keep all the knowledge in their head, keep all the reactions in their head. If you take this, you do that. What does it represent? Could it be this? It says, these seconds can be life and death, right? They can absolutely be life and death. So they don't want you someone who's a fly-by-nighter. They don't want someone who's lazy, right? They want somebody who's going to be steeped in this, and they're going to live and drink and smoke this 24/7, right? Or 24, 6.5, whatever it is. But they want somebody who's going to be all in, right? And if you're not all in when it comes to the process of conversion, or even someone who wants to be a Noahide, right? If you're not all in, then you're just going to get beaten down in life. And you're not going to know how to deal with things when people say things, when rabbis say things, other people say things, family members. It's very easy to get sucked in. It's very easy to get beaten down, even by the people closest to us. And at the end of the day, it's hard to stay strong, especially someone who's a Noahide living in the middle of nowhere. No support. You're stuck in the prairie somewhere. No support at all. Makes it much more difficult. Much, much more difficult, right? So what we're saying over here is the person has to have, absolutely have thick skin. They have to basically say the whole world can go to hell. I am going to be in this process. I am going to do whatever it takes to get the other side. And a person really has to say, you know what? God, give me your best shot. You give me your best shot. I'm still coming. Right now, then all of a sudden, other things happen. Say, no, I was just kidding. I just wanted a curveball. I didn't really want the hard stuff, right? But in the end, what we have to do is we have to be prepared almost for anything, right? To expect the unexpected, to expect that no one's going to help us, right? I would say like this, to expect nothing, and everything else you get is a bonus. Now, I'm not saying people should be pushed aside. I'm not saying people shouldn't be taught. What I'm saying is the road is extremely bumpy. And if you're not willing to hold on to the Torah like a life preserver, right? You're not willing to take the bumps, to work hard, to sweat, to feel the pain, you'll never get there. You will never, ever get there because, just like I know somebody became a Noahide, lived very small place in Texas, population like 3,000. And what happened? He lost all his friends, lost all his, social business, right? Couldn't really speak to too many people. Why? Because in this small town, everything revolved around the church.
Yep.
Since everything revolved around the church, this person lost everything. His kids were still in public school. So, his kids were alienated. His family was alienated. But he told me, he says, Rabbi, he said, there's no turning back. One day I may get out of Dodge. But right now, there's no turning back, right? And he was talking from someone who's been totally isolated. Now, someone who's been totally isolated is very hard. It's very hard. You talk to others, you sound like a preacher, right? You sound like a missionary, and they don't want to listen, and they don't really care, and they think you're a fruitcake, right? And all that. So therefore, if we are not prepared, right? This is the point. If a person is not prepared, then what's going to be? You are going to get crushed.
Oh.
Right? I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying people should do it. I'm not advocating this. My job is to make sure people understand and are aware of what's around them, of what potentially could happen. Now, I'm not saying this will happen. I'm not saying that it should happen. What I'm saying is there's a reality, right? There's a reality. And people coming out from the outside, they say, why don't we get more help? Why don't schools accept our kids? Why we consider like second-class citizens? I'm not saying it's right. There are 36 prohibitions in the Torah about the idea of not causing a convert bad feelings, right? Not making them feel bad. 36 times, right? So someone will say, how come this person did this? How come this rabbi said that? How come these Orthodox Jews did this? Right? So it doesn't mean we always do the right thing, right? No question about that. At the same time, don't mix up Jews and Judaism, right? That's also a big mistake. As my Rebbe would say, someone moves into a Jewish community and they see how Orthodox Jews act and they still want to be, Orthodox, and either they're the real deal or they're 100% nuts, right? Because, so people say, okay, so I don't mix up Jews and Judaism. So I asked him once, I said, well, what if they take my class? He goes, no, then they're for sure nuts. I was like, oh, that's beautiful. And I'm so glad you support me. I hate to see what my enemies would do, right? But the point over here is you have to have broad shoulders, right? And the most important thing, as we spoke about, way back when, is you have to attach yourself to a rabbinic scholar, even if it costs you money, right? Because the person needs guidance. Everybody needs guidance in this world, right? Without guidance, you don't get anywhere.
No, of course not.
We just get aggravated. But people say, I'll navigate it. I'll figure it out. You know what? I need to listen to someone else. Why do I need to listen, to a rabbi and this and that? I'll figure it out. They don't want to be subservient to anyone. They've already been lied to anyway, certainly by the church, and all that. It all doesn't matter. Why do I say it all doesn't matter? Because now you're starting from zero. Once you're starting from zero, I would say, well, the only place you can go is up. Well, that's not necessarily true. You could go down tremendously, but the most constant thing in my own life that has helped me through thick and thin is the fact I had good rabbis behind me, right? I could ask them, I could go to them, they knew how to deal with me, even though it was a tough nut to crack in general, right? But in the end, the fact that most of the time I listened, that was to my benefit, right? I'm not saying I always listen, but I'm saying that, if a person wants to get, really to the other side, whatever the other side means, whether by conversion, becoming a Noahide, learning, person has to have guidance. You cannot just rely on your own knowledge. It's not going to happen, right? Like someone says, oh, I only thought there were 7 Noahide laws. Yeah, because you didn't find a website out there that says there are other more than 7 laws, right? That the 7 are only an umbrella. Oh, I really thought there were only 7. And now you say all these things, quote unquote, making you somewhat of an expert, but you don't even know there are more than 7, right? So where's the humility? Where's the humility? A person can never get to repentance. The Avos, Duty of the Heart says, you can never get to repentance if you don't have humility, right? What's the opposite of humility? Is arrogance. Arrogance in the ways of the righteous. There's a whole gate speaks about arrogance. And he says over there, arrogance is the main thing for all bad character traits. All bad character traits are based on arrogance. How do you get rid of arrogance? Says the Duties of the Heart, the only way to get rid of arrogance is to be humble, to be truly humble. Once you're truly humble, you understand your purpose in life, then you can get to repentance. Why? Because then if you did something wrong against someone else, you can admit, I've done something wrong. Once you've admitted you've done something wrong, that's the process for repentance. But if you don't admit you've done anything wrong, and you say, listen, the person deserved it, and even if they did, so what? If you caused them damage, you said Lashon Hara against them, you have to ask them for forgiveness. Now, you're not going to tell them what you said against them. You just say, if I did anything wrong, do you forgive me? Obviously, you have in mind what you did, but the only way you get there is by humility. If you don't have humility, you don't get off the ground. So here I was, hotshot, my 3rd year of university. I came to Israel, right? I came to learn in yeshiva, right? So I started off on the lowest level, knew how to read Hebrew, didn't really understand very much. My Rebbe says, okay, read the Mishnah. Coffman, read the Mishnah. It's like, oh no, I'll take the 0. They're like, no, you're not taking a 0. You're going to tell me what the Mishnah says. Now here you are, a hot shot, or somewhat of a hot shot, right? So to speak, you can't even explain one simple Mishnah, right? So, if a person is willing to be a sponge, they're willing to learn, they're willing to put in the time, right? The Talmud tells us anyone who puts in the time, you will get out of it. There is no such thing. If I put into time, I get a goose egg, right? If I put in the effort, I get a goose egg. If a person, though, learns from the wrong people, if they try and jump through hoops, in other words, someone who's only learning the timetables wants to do calculus, it's not going to go. Right? Someone doesn't know anything, can't read Hebrew, you're not learning Kabbalah. Forget Kabbalah. Move on. Right? You have to take step by step. When you take step by step and you have proper guidance, you'll get there. You might have plateaus. You might go up. You might, at the beginning, you might go level after level after level. Then you might hit a plateau. You might go up. You might go down. Right? Whatever it is, bottom line is you need to be constant. Right? You need to constantly learn. And you need to constantly learn from people that are qualified, that people know what they're talking about, right? People that are not frauds, people that are not teaching Kabbalah, right? I know people out there, a lot of followers, teaching a lot of things in Kabbalah. My opinion, for what it's worth, water it down. Water it down so much. You're not talking about these high spiritual levels that no one's holding by, that no one even really understands. Right. I was listening to a class, kind of bothered me a little bit. Somebody.
And when is it just rhetoric?
Somebody well-known giving a class to women and speaking in a deeper level, talking about Kabbalistic concepts. First, it's very deep, right? Speaks about current events, other things. It sort of bothered me a little bit that, he's teaching women, which I don't have an issue with, but teaching women at a level that they're not at. In other words, bringing up concepts that they don't have a clue about. In realistic terms. Doesn't matter if they're women or men. I would say if you're teaching men, I'd say the same thing, right? You can water it down up to a point, right? But if a person is at that level and they understand things at that level, either water it down tremendously or don't bring out things that people are not necessarily going to understand. They're not going to fathom, right? They're not a vessel to be able to fathom it, again, because they're holding by the times tables, right? If they're holding by the times tables, you're not bringing in calculus, right? And this is one of my pet peeves because I speak about it a lot. Speak to people at their level, right? Someone wants to learn Hasidus. There are certain things in Hasidus that are very deep, right? There are people out in Chabad that teach people that don't know anything about Tanya, right? And Tanya is not an easy book to learn. Very much steeped in Kabbalah. A lot of it's steeped in Hasidus and Kabbalah. Put those together. You have to be somewhere. You have to be holding somewhere. Right? So, they want to teach the Rebbe's Torah. I understand. Right? It was the first Lubavitcher Rebbe wrote the Tanya. I understand. It's a very deep book. I wouldn't teach it to beginners. It's not a book for beginners. Plenty of books in Jewish philosophy for beginners. That's not one of them. Right? But they're out there teaching to the masses. They have other reasons potentially why they may do that. Okay. Right? But again, someone at a level that they're not ready for this. So either it has to be so watered down that they're going to at least understand something. But if you're teaching them at a certain level, how much are they going to get? How much are they really going to get? Right? So you have to be leery of that. So I would say that if someone's going to teach a lot of this stuff, don't listen to them.
Yeah, Rabbi, it's like a university.
One second. I'm not saying that these people aren't good, that they're not knowledgeable. I'm not even going that far. Right? There are plenty of people out there, certainly knowledgeable in this stuff. The question is, who are they giving it over to? Right? That's the question. If they're giving it over to people that can't handle it, right, that really don't truly understand it, then there's no point to do that. There is no point to do that. I could understand in a certain way why certain things may be taught out there, but you're doing a disservice because you got to take them from A to B, and then from B to C. And then from C to D. You cannot go from A to D and try and expect, even if someone's a genius, to pick that up. They're not going. Torah's not like anything else. Try and do that in applied physics. Take someone who's taken physics in high school, right? As an example, they taken physics in high school, right? Now, second year physics course in college, in university, are they going to be holding there? Now, I might say it depends how much they really know. Maybe, right? But most people are not going to be holding there, right? So if they're not going to be holding there, why are you going to take a class that's above you, right? That's way above you. You know, you're gonna get pieces. You know, you're not going to get very much. Yeah, you had a question before?
Well, yeah, it's somewhat some points that it'd be like a university professor trying to teach pre-kindergarten, and he's just there trying to share, and he knows they cannot, take certain things. But my concern, Rabbi, is somebody who's been down the garden path. I see a lot of systems that are just a garden path. They're taking you on an adventure. I mean, I've been studying of late a concept called Dira Betachtonim, and it's one of the Rebbe's, former Rebbe's, Chabad Rebbe's kind of concept, but it goes back a long way, and I have a reason and a purpose for why I'm studying it. But I still don't understand the whole context or even Hebrew. And so, I try to use my strengths in a way that is useful.
Not understanding Hebrew is not necessarily the issue, right? There are a lot of things out there in translation. But, even in translation, I'll give an example. The Rambam's book, the Guide for the Perplexed. Why did the Rambam's
never
book,
made
Guide
it
for
through
the
it?
Perplexed, why was it written? It was written because many Jews were going astray from Aristotle, right? From teachings of Aristotle, and some say that the Rambam sort of went overboard, was affected by it, in a negative way. Whatever it is, he wrote a unbelievable philosophical work called The Guide for the Perplexed. Now, he wrote it.
I've gone through it a couple of times, but never can't get through it.
Went through it. He started it, he wrote it in Arabic, very flowery language in Arabic, translated into Hebrew, very difficult Hebrew to go through, retranslated into English, right? So now it's already like translation from a translation, right? But what's the point? The Rambam there tries to explain what's behind the mitzvahs, right? Why we do the mitzvahs. Now, that's not a bad thing. Definitely not a bad thing. You're right. And what he's doing is not applicable at all to anyone in this generation. He was writing it for his generation, right? Because people left and right were going astray from secular philosophy. Now, today, there are no philosophers, right? Basically, what people are doing is based on desire. It has nothing to do with philosophy. There are no real philosophers today. So that book, to me, is basically a waste of time. Now, if someone wants to learn it, I'm not going to say, don't, you can't learn it per se, but a person has to keep in mind, there are a lot of esoteric things there also. Because I remember once looking up something where it was talking about what's going up on in heaven, with the stars and the moon and the planets sinning, right? The Talmud speaks about it, that the sun didn't want to shine for a certain thing, and God says, if you don't shine, I'm going to stick lightning bolts, and you're going to shine whether you like it or not, right? So the whole thing, like what's going on here, right? The Talmud speaks also, Rashi at the beginning of Genesis talks about the fight between the moon and the sun, right? Who's going to get the greater light, and God gave the greater light to the sun, right? But the moon has light for nighttime, so he lights up everything at night, and all the stars, and the planets are a reflection of the moon, right? The light of the moon, which the moon is a reflection of the sun. Okay, very nice, right? But there's a whole deeper thing going on here. How in the world, in general, right? You got to look at these pieces of Talmud, and you got to think over here. You got to delve into it, because it's, different esoteric aspects of the Talmud, i.e., what we call Agadata. Stories in the Talmud, some of them are exaggerations, exaggerations in the sense that, in the time of the Second Temple, there are different opinions how many people died. Some say it was 4 million, 400 million, whatever. And, it's hard to say there were that many people in the world at that time, right? You'll disagree with that. 4 million people way back when, come on, right? So the commentaries say, you can't take this literally. right? You're not allowed. It means that a lot of people died. How many? Okay, that's up for discussion, right? But it can't. You cannot take it literally. So, but the question is, what do we gain from it? What do we learn from it? So a friend of mine would say, you could learn these types of Gemaras, and you could learn it in 5 minutes or 5 days. Sorry, 5 years, right? That's how deep it is.
Deep it is, yeah.
That's how deep it really is. So meaning that if a person is not steeped enough, let's say, in Jewish philosophy, and now they're going to bring up concepts that you don't really know what's going on. Now, it doesn't mean your brain can't pick up things. It doesn't mean a person cannot be intelligent enough, and they're not going to get anything, from it. But the thing is, what are they really going to get? What are they really going to get? They get bits and pieces, right? Again, it doesn't necessarily have to do with the language. The language is a different issue. Right? That's why I brought up the Rambam. The language is a different issue. But even let's say there's a good translation, right? Even if there's a good translation, that doesn't butter the biscuit because you don't understand what it's saying, right? In other words, we could gain certain things by, what we learn. It may not really fully grasp, what they're really getting at. Now, I'll give an example. I'll give another example, right? What's another deep book I always recommend is the book Derech Hashem, right? A very deep book. I have a class on it. I'll give a plug for it now. 33 classes, 62 hours, right? Whenever anyone interested, contact me on Facebook for it. But what's the book about? It's about why God created the world. What's the purpose of man? Reincarnation, suffering, how the spiritual forces work, right? The Ramchal, at a very young age, was very much steeped in Kabbalah. Some people considered him a heretic because he's writing about this stuff at a very young age, right? Regardless, everybody holds these books are gold. Path of the Just, the Vilna Gaon, classic book in Musar. In ethics, the Vilna Gaon, Rav Elijah Vilna, more than 250 years ago, said there's not one extra word. Not one extra word in the book, right? But the book Derech Hashem is very much steeped in Kabbalah. Now, why would I recommend to Jews who don't know that much about Judaism or even Noahites to read the book if it's very much steeped in Kabbalah? And why in the world would I give classes on it? No, it's not about to make money. That's the wrong answer. The answer is because even if you read it at a superficial level, at a very low level, you are going to see things that are absolutely going to change your life. How the evil inclination works, right? How, what we do and how it matters, right? And how a spiritual act, a physical act can be something spiritual. How there can be repercussions in this world, in the next world. Yeah, it's all very deep, right? It's all very deep, but it's a game changer. It's a game changer understanding how these things work. Now, the issue is, most probably religious Jews don't learn it because it's very deep. Right, not an easy book to go through, no question. Not only that, it's very much steeped in Kabbalah, right? Everyone knows I'm not a Kabbalist. I didn't play him on TV. So there's a lot of things I'm not going to get at that Kabbalistic level, right, in order to give over in that deep way. True, 100% true, right? But if anyone's ever heard me give a class on it, it's very deep without Kabbalah, right? But it's a game changer. So some people say, nah, they're not ready for it. They shouldn't look at it. That may be true. That very well may be true. And people may disagree with me. That's fine. But even if someone reads it at a relatively superficial level, right, without, forget about Kabbalah, without delving, into the intricacies or whatever, you're going to have such a benefit from it. There's no question, right? There's no question. But there are other things out there that you're just, without background knowledge. Right, I always say when I do these videos on Tanakh, I always say, okay, I have to explain behind what's going on, because if I don't explain what's behind going on, you're never gonna understand it, right? So this week, right, Monday, give another plug. Monday, 2:00 Eastern time, 9:00 Israel time. Hopefully, I think we're going to speak about suffering. In order to speak about suffering, you have to understand what happens when the soul goes in the body. You have to understand the fight between good and evil. You have to understand, what mitzvahs we do, what the punishment is if I don't do them, right? And what the repercussions could be, right? So, it could take 15, 20 minutes, just to get to the background to understand the question, right? Now, so, someone will say, well, why can't you do it in simpler terms? Because you're not going to get it, I once spoke, I was interviewing for a job in the States. I spoke at a Jewish community center. I spoke about reincarnation. So when I spoke about reincarnation, somebody said that, oh, you're going to speak about the 5 aspects of the soul and about this and about that. I said, no, I'm going to speak about the evil inclination. I'm going to speak about getting judged, how judgment works, going through all that. I said, and then the last 10, 15 minutes, I'll speak about reincarnation. Because if I don't give the background first, no one's going to understand. You have to start from A to get to B, to get to C, to get to Z. Right? If you miss the first steps and you try and jump to the middle, you're not going to understand it. Yeah, it could be there's certain things I could explain in a much quicker way, but it doesn't do any benefit to anybody if steps are missed and you miss the first point. Because if one thing's dependent on another, right? Just like in mathematics, A is to B, a C is to D. You got to figure out the relationship. I was never good at geometry, right? But you got to figure out the relationship and how these things work, how they're intertwined, and then you get to something else that's different. Steps. Right? But if you don't understand how A is to B and B is to C and how that works, then you can't go further than that. That's impossible, right? That's not going to happen. Now, at a more sophisticated, higher level, is the person going to get there? One day, right? But even at a superficial level of understanding basically how it works, now there are a lot of details, right? There are a lot of things that can happen that can override, certain things. So not everything is 100%. It's going to be like this, going to be like that, going to be like the other thing. There are other factors. There are other factors that are involved that could easily offset. One could offset something else, right? I mentioned actually in my Tanakh talk last week, I mentioned that you have spiritual forces, right? We talked about fallen angels, right? Spiritual forces. You have angels that are in control of different things, right? You can have an angel of the wind that God said, okay, I want you to make a hurricane, or, make it very nice, make it very balmy, a little bit of a wind, and you have an angel guarding trees, making sure trees don't get uprooted. But what happens when God says, okay, he tells the angel of the wind, you're going to make a hurricane. You're going to make a tornado. You're going to make a cyclone over here. So what happened to the angel guarding the tree? Now, the angel guarding the tree may be a powerful angel, right? But the problem is he's guarding the tree against, 250 kilometer, a wind over here. So as strong as he is, most likely that tree, or I would say a trailer park, right? Because that's the first thing. That's the first thing a tornado hits is a trailer park, right? So what's going to happen? That trailer park or that tree, because it's true, that tree or trailer park is going to get uprooted. Okay, but now I have spiritual forces here. So how does that work? I have a spiritual force that is guarding the tree. But you know what? I have a bigger spiritual force that's making wind. And when the wind's 150 miles an hour or 260 kilometers or whatever it is, and it's coming, it's huffing and puffing, you're a wuss over here. This other spiritual force is going to get the most. Now you're going to say, but isn't he a spiritual force? Doesn't he have the power over here to stop the wind? No, he doesn't have the power, right? He will not have the power to stop the wind because God is giving the strength of the power in order to uproot the tree. So what's the point of that? The point of that is there are things that offset. There are things that absolutely offset. So if it offsets, it doesn't mean, look, these spiritual forces do whatever they want. No, they're programmed, right? They're absolutely programmed. We're not going to, watch my video last week. They're programmed. They cannot act out. There's no possible way, because that means God is deficient, right? And that's the first of the Rambam's 13 principles of faith. God is absolute. He cannot be deficient. He cannot have control, right? So if this wind says, I want to make a hurricane, right? I want to destroy the prairies, right? I'm going to make a cyclone. I'm going to, knock off Dan's house over here. Like the Wizard of Oz. We're going to kill the witch of the East or the West, God forbid, right? Where's Auntie Em when you need her, right? So if God says, I like Dan, Dan's a good guy, a 6'7" white guy that can dunk it. Okay. We're going to cut Dan some slack over here. God's going to say no, right? So what does the wind say? Wind says, I disagree. I want to uproot his house. And God says, go ahead, go ahead and try, right? And the wind's sitting there and huffing
Book of
and
Job,
puffing,
Book
and
of
God
Job.
says, beep. He goes, blink, that's it, it's over, right? Not going to happen, right? So therefore, forces do have power, but they do not have power in and of their own, right? Which, again, not to get into that,
For
but
purpose.
There's a purpose. There's a hierarchy, right? And what the Ramchal over there in Derech Hashem is saying is just like in this world, there's a hierarchy how things work, right? You go to, God forbid, someone has to go to court and the judge has to hear all the evidence and all that. When a person gets judged after 120 years upstairs, God's going to hear all the evidence, right? God, we're recording right now, and God and the angels are recording everything that we do, right, on a daily basis. So therefore, God's going to bring up all the angels, say, okay, let's see, bring up everything the person done, for good, for bad, and then God's going to judge it, right? However God is going to judge it. So one of the points is the fact that the Ramchal says, just like in this world, there's a hierarchy. There are things that work in a court of law. Oh, there's also a heavenly court. I'm not going to give judgment even though I could, but I'm going to make a system set up in the heavenly court just like it is down here. Do I have to do that? No. Right? When God says, let us make man in our image, right? Everybody asks, who's he talking to? He's talking the heavenly court. Why is he talking the heavenly court? Right? So in God's humility. But couldn't people make a mistake and say, oh, people think there's more than one God? They can make a mistake, become heretics. True. Very true. Right? But if they really think it, they really understand, they know that's not true. But the point is, God is talking to his heavenly court. Should we create man? Is it good? Is it bad? Is this? Is that? He doesn't have to do that. He certainly doesn't have to do that. God knows. Right? But in the end, what is he doing? He's showing humility. So someone would ask, why is God showing humility? Right? Because the Torah wants to show that he is humble. Right? That we have to be like him. That's what we say to we learned today in the Torah portion of the week in Leviticus chapter 19. Right? You should be holy because God is holy. Right? So the question what that means. Right? Not doing anything excessive, meaning that a person, if something is permitted, does not mean I have to abuse it. Right? If a person is allowed to eat meat, doesn't mean you should be a glutton. Right? Doesn't mean you should be, so much overweight. Or if you're allowed to drink, doesn't mean you should be an alcoholic. You have to use things in proportion. Right? So, I mean, that's one opinion. Another opinion says, talks about, is really talking about, immorality, right? And being in control of that, that desire, right? Whatever it is, God is showing you in the Torah itself what to do, what not to do, right? Whether we understand it or not, everything we do, the whole idea is being close to God. If I do the wrong thing, I take two steps back, 4 steps back, 8 steps back. But there's also repentance, right? I have the ability to repent. Right? If I'd have the ability to repent, you wouldn't be listening to me. You'd all be dead, right? We see by the book of Nineveh, the book of Jonah, right? By Nineveh, we see non-Jews have the ability to repent, right? So the whole point, over here is that a person has to be tuned in the right way, right? They have to be tuned in the right way. They have to listen to the right people. They have to get the right information. If not, you can veer off in a lot of different directions, which unfortunately we see. Right? Unfortunately, we see this on a regular basis. There are, I would call them unscrupulous, even if they claim they're doing it for the right reason. They're veering off. Right? There are ways to learn Torah. There are ways not to learn Torah. Right? If you're within the system, okay, there are 70 faces to Torah. Not everyone's going to learn the same. Right, but you have to be within the parameters. If you're not within the parameters, right, my language, you're going to be out over here, right? So now back to our Mishnah, right? That was a little bit of a digression there, right? But the point was that a person who's unlearned, how can he not be pious? How can he not be righteous? The reason is because he's not steeped in Torah, right? If you are steeped in Torah, you have the ability, potentially, to be a Torah scholar. Being a Torah scholar means I take what the Torah says, I implement it in my life, right? Keeping Jewish law, whatever applies to me. Also keeping ethical laws, which everybody has to keep. If a person, as we said before, if a person learns Torah because it's very intellectually stimulating, right, but they're not interested in changing their life, Says Ramosha Schneider, my Rebbe's Rebbe, a blessed memory, you will be the ultimate ultra-Orthodox student. That will not mean that you're a Torah scholar. That may mean you have a lot of knowledge, right? That may mean you can spit back a lot of information. That does not mean you're righteous by any stretch. You can be totally immoral, right? You can be brilliant and be totally immoral. What's the famous example we'd always say? Bertrand Russell, right? Bertrand Russell taught ethics, my alma mater, right? He taught ethics. And his students asked him, how could you be so unethical? What was his answer? If I taught mathematics, you expect me to be a square? Right? We don't believe in that. If there's an obligation to be ethical, you can't have 120 IQ and be unethical. Right? You got to follow it through according to Torah. Right? If not, then that's not called Torah. That's not learning Torah. Now, someone's going to say, but doesn't that mean we're not perfect? You're right, we're not perfect. But we're not taking it to that extreme. You know, we're not learning it and say, okay, I'm going to be this ultimate, ultra-Orthodox student. I'm not going to apply any of this, to my learning, to my, to changing my life, so to speak, or put into action. What am I going to do? I'm going to learn because I like to learn, right? It's intellectually stimulating. Well, that's beautiful. But what does that have to do
novelty.
with Torah?
You can't treat it like novelty.
What does that have to do with Torah? You're not getting the truth, right? Because you're looking at it in a skewed way. Even if you understand the picayune details of the arguments between the rabbis and this and that, you're not applying it, right? Remember what we said at the beginning. What do we say at the beginning? We said the paragraph before the Shema, right? In the morning. What do we say? Le'omod olamed lishmor v'lasos, right? Lishmor means to guard. Lasos means to do, right? So all this intellectual ability and all this, intellectual mumbo jumbo and learning and this and that is all worth spit in my language if you don't apply the lesson. Right? Someone will say, well, don't you get credit for learning? Won't you get credit over here? So there is a Talmudic dictum.
I think you're more accountable.
The Talmudic dictum is that even if I learn not for the sake of heaven, it'll lead me to the sake of heaven. Right? So someone could say that. They can say, listen, okay, I'm not really learning for the sake of heaven. True. Right? But what potentially could happen? The Torah is so powerful that what can happen? It can change a person. They can see the greatness of Torah in so many different ways, it could change them. So therefore, even if they learn not for the sake of heaven, they could still get credit for learning. Why? Because it could lead them. It could lead them in the right direction. But someone could say, what if they never get to the right direction? You're right. So even if a person never gets to the right direction, they could still have that potential. They definitely could still have that potential because Torah has the ability to transform us, right? And we, at a certain point, a person can be very vulnerable, extremely vulnerable, and all of a sudden something clicks in our head. Let's say it's a person sick, and the doctors give up all hope, right? And they say, well, there's nothing more. How many times the doctor said, well, there's nothing more we can do. You better pray. Right? Unfortunately, doctors don't have the greatest bedside manner. I mean, some have better than others.
Yeah.
But they could say, there's
no
family
member in that case.
They could say there's no hope. Right? Now, what happened? Let's say a person, there was a story I read recently where somebody had a brain tumor, right? A nice-sized brain tumor. And basically it's like life and death. And this person, I don't know, either they took on something or I forget exactly what it was, but, they prayed with all their might and said, God, you take me out of this, I'm going to do this. Or I'm going to do that, I'm going to do the other thing. Right before the person went into surgery, they did another scan. And right before they went into surgery, tumor was gone. Tumor disappeared. Now, the doctors obviously are dumbfounded over here because they have no explanation. They have no scientific explanation. Right?
Yeah.
And
here's the image, and here it is.
Right. And doctors, according to us, only have the ability to heal on the outside. Right? We mentioned this before. The Torah says I think in Parshas Mishpatim, at the end of the verse, it says, Rape Rape. Means that they have the ability to heal. Right? They will surely heal. Now, what does that mean? What it means is, okay, we have to put our best foot forward. Doctors are just messengers. Right? But what can they really heal? What they can really heal is something that is external. Right? That they can heal. That 100% they can heal. right? But what about something internal? Right now, you could have the best doctor, the best surgeon, right? Let's say better. He does the operation, closes up the patient, and he says, okay, we're going to see what happens, right? All things being equal, the person should be healed. Everything should be good, but they don't know. They don't know. They'll say, according to this should happen, right? If all things go well, the body, will regenerate, will regroup, and, it'll take time, rehabilitation, these other things. But after they sew up the person, there's an expression here in Israel. The surgery was successful, but the patient died. So you can have the surgery be 100% successful. And what happened? Complication, the patient dies, right?
Mm-hmm.
But even if, let's say, for argument's sake, the surgery is successful. Now, what does it mean that the internal organs, whatever's cut open, that it heals? Now, doctors cannot heal. They don't have that ability. They can tell you this will happen, take these antibiotics, take this, take that, take the other thing, right? And eventually,
they'll try and
all things being equal, the tissue should heal, right? It'll take time, but let's say, for argument's sake, it should heal, right? But there are complications. There are infections. Someone has a kidney transplant, you're on medication for life to make sure the kidney sticks. All these different things. All these different things. Now, that being the case, what happens? What happens? They close the person up. They are not in control. They did everything in their ability. They could be world experts. Doesn't really matter. The surgery was successful. Now it depends on the person's body. If they're stronger, if they're weaker, they could say this could happen, that could happen. The majority of the time this happens. There are complications. Right? I know a great rabbi a number of years ago slipped on ice over here, had surgery in his knee. Came out of the surgery okay, and then something happened. And he died in the hospital from knee surgery.
Surgery.
From knee it was after knee surgery. I don't know if he had a stroke, maybe he had a heart attack. I don't know exactly what, but in the end, nothing should have happened. The surgery was successful, right? His knee got fixed. Everything was on the up and up, and then something else happened, right? So what's the obvious answer? God wanted to take this person. That's what God wanted to do, right? So even if this is surgery successful and they say, okay, it's going to take, a few months to rehabilitate, take this, take that. Okay, but they're not in control. Once they sew up the person, they may have to go back in, whatever the case is. But once they sew up the person, they are 100% not in control. They are not in control. Now, if the body's healthy, all things being equal, the body will heal. If not, maybe an infection gets in, maybe there are other complications. Nobody really knows. They could go according to statistics. You could be against those statistics, right? You could say 75% of the time this happens, 25% this happens. If you take any medication, right? My mother was once telling me that she has to take a certain medication, and there's a whole laundry list of side effects. But she had to take the medication for whatever it was. She had to take this medication. So they're like 25 side effects. Most of the people probably won't get any of them. Some of them may get a few of them. It's like with COVID, taking the vaccine. Some had worse reactions, some had better reactions, whatever it is, right? But you can say, okay, there are 10 different things that could happen. So for you had 2. For him, he had 4. Someone else, they had 0. Now, how can they pinpoint that? They can't. In other words, they're covering themselves by saying this is what possibly could happen so they don't get sued. Because you're taking this willingly. You're taking this medication willingly. They don't want to have any lawsuits over here. It's like going to Disney World. If you have a heart condition, you can't go on Space Mountain, right? Now, if you lie, let's say you say, no, I don't have a heart condition. You still want to go on Space Mountain. You still want to go on Space Mountain, right? And then you have a heart attack on Space Mountain. And you're going to sue them. You can't sue them because you had a heart condition. You already warned, right?
Pre-existing, yeah.
So if you're already warned, you don't have a claim, right? You don't have a claim. Now, any of these side effects may not happen to anybody, right? Like I said, some people may get it, some people not, but they are protecting themselves so they don't get sued. So if a person doesn't get any of the side effects, very good. If they get some of the side effects, they were warned, right? I know someone takes high blood pressure medication, and certain things had side effects. He had side effects, right? Definitely had side effects, right? Then they lower this medicine, do this, whatever, things were more stable, but these things can happen. Now, for each, the point is, for each individual, it's not going to affect them the same way. It may not even affect them the same time, meaning one person could, the person can take it, and let's say they take it a few months later. One time it affected them, the other time it didn't. So what happened? Right? That's an anomaly. You tell me, well, if it affects them one time, it should affect them again, maybe. Right? The idea here is they have no control. The doctors can say what they want. At that point, when they sew the person up, there is no control. There is zero control. So the ability to heal is only going to be external. Because once they sew the person up, they have to say, okay, we did our job. Now let's see how the body is going to respond. Work, right? So here, back to our case, I just wanted to mention that as well. So back to our case here about, learning and being steeped in Torah and being a true scholar. This is why someone who's unlearned will not get there, right? Because they don't know. If they learned, if they apply, what they learned, there is potential for that. If they learn, they don't apply what they learn, doesn't matter what they learn, doesn't have effect on them. It could have a negative effect. That's why we say the Torah can be what we call samamavis. It can be death. It can be literally be death for them. You're going to say, wow, a person's learning, they're gaining, all this knowledge and, in different things, but it affects them in a negative way. Why? Because they don't apply it. If they don't apply it, it's held against them, right? They're going to say, what's the point of learning if you're not going to apply it? So God can say, that's great. He's learning my Torah. He's learning my Torah, but, he's still acting, without derech eretz, right? Without proper character traits. I'll tell one story that one of my rabbis learned under a Talmudic genius, right? An absolute Talmudic genius. I mentioned the story before, but it's good to repeat. And that is, he didn't last by more than 2 weeks. He said, he could say, explanations like this, and the Jerusalem Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, backwards and forwards, and this and that. He said his character traits were so bad that he said he couldn't learn Torah from him. So now you would ask the question, okay, but look at all the knowledge. Look at all the knowledge. But don't we say you need Torah and derech eretz? Torah and derech eretz literally means, people explain it to mean you need Torah with a parnasa. You need to learn Torah and have a job, right? You can't have one without the other. But what does derech eretz mean? Derech eretz means proper character traits. So derech eretz kidmon l'Torah, as we say, it came before the Torah. So if a person's learning Torah and his character traits are abysmal, then the Torah he's learning is not worth anything, right? If you have rabbis out there, quote unquote, that call people out, call them names, degrade other rabbinic authorities, then that person's got a problem. You want to disagree, you can disagree, do it privately. But if you call someone out, unless they're a heretic, right? A heretic's a different issue. But if they're not a heretic, that's just egregious, right? That means, that the Talmud says that somebody wants to learn under a rabbi, he has to be in his eyes like an angel. Now, it doesn't mean he's perfect. If he's not in your eyes like an angel, you can't learn from him. So somebody like that, whose character traits are an absolute disaster, right? An absolute disaster. You can't learn Torah from such a person, right? Certainly can't learn Torah from such a person because, guy's abysmal over here. Yeah, question.
Not really a question. No, go ahead, Rabbi.
So somebody, somebody like that, you have to be careful. So somebody could be steeped in Torah, could be considered really a Torah scholar, but if they act in an abysmal way, the Torah's not worth anything, right? You shouldn't learn from them. Now, the reason over here is because this character trait needs pureness of heart. You need the merit of the soul to grow in Torah and mitzvahs, right? And someone who's unlearned does not have it. There's no, a person could say, like those cardiac Jews, right? I know a lot of them, especially some in my own family. They're good in their hearts. Cardiac means heart, obviously, right? Cardiac kids, right? Remember the cardiac kids? Anyway, if someone's a cardiac Jew, that means I'm good in my heart. So what? All you have to ask them is, okay, what does goodness mean to you? I don't cheat on my taxes. Okay. Do you do this? Do you do the other thing? right? You cannot be a good person without being steeped in Torah, right? I mean, it's very easy to prove because a lot of people thought they were good, but they were absolute disasters, right? One of them being, you take Stalin, you take Pol Pot. Now, I wouldn't use Hitler, Yamach Shemoy V'zichro, may rot wherever he is. You wouldn't use him as an example because you can't compare someone to Hitler, right? That's already bad. That's already really bad. They won't get the message if you mention that, right? But if you mention like these other madmen, didn't these other madmen think they were doing a great thing for the world? Pol Pot killing, millions of people. You didn't think that was, Stalin killing tens of millions, for the sake of communism or whatever. He didn't.
Well, we
he
can
didn't
be
think
sincere.
he didn't think he was doing the right.
Yes.
He himself didn't think he was doing the right thing. Of course he did. Right? No question about it. Right? Anybody who's got a messed up mentality where they kill them physically or spiritually, right, doesn't really matter. Right? They could be good in and of themselves. So someone will say, nah, these people are crazy. Well, why are they crazy? Because what they're doing is wrong. Why what they're doing is wrong. So then you have to break it down, right? Essentially, you have to ask the question, what is good? What is your definition of good? Right now, the definition of good is going to be problematic because then you're going to have to come on to moral relativism. Things change, times change, right? So, one of these things, one of these videos did on Tanakh talk about proving God's existence. We tried to prove it through morality, right? To show under any circumstances is murder ever permitted, right? And, we went through a whole laundry list of potential things, and we finally came up, to one thing is that you have to look in the Torah for this because no other system is going to give you a concrete answer because it's going to change according to time, according to, all kinds of things. Right? So a person at this point who is unlearned cannot be pious. There's no possible way. Right? Someone is going to say, well, you think you're a better Jew than I am. It's not a question, I think I'm better or not. We have obligations according to the Torah. God tells us what to do, what not to do. So if you go against what God says, you have a problem with him, he's going to have a problem with you. Right? They're going to say, well, you think anyone doesn't think like you. Again, is the Torah true? Is it not true? Is it make-believe? If we're not talking at the same level, then there's no point to have this discussion, right? But essentially, if I believe it's true, and I believe there's right and wrong, and you go against what I believe to be right and wrong, i.e. according to the Torah, then you're wrong. Then according to the Torah, you're wrong, right? And you don't have to prove otherwise why it's okay. So, therefore, someone who's unlearned, right? Someone who doesn't know anything about Torah and mitzvahs, how can they be pious? We speak about the righteous of the nations. So you're going to say, but they don't learn, if they don't learn very much, how can they be righteous? Because what they need to do is what's obvious. What they need to do is universal. If it's universal, what are they going to say? Right? God's gonna cut them a lot of slack unless they transgress. But they have they have an easier ability in different ways to have a portion of the world to come than we do. Why are you going to say, but no one, not too many people are teaching them the Noahide laws. How are they supposed to get there? 95% they would have figured out on their own. 100% they would have figured out on their own. Right? So they could have a portion of the world to come. That wouldn't be an issue. Right? Because it's obvious. So how could someone, be righteous as a non-Jew? Because they're keeping universal laws. They're keeping things that make sense according to the Torah. Right? This is why over here we're talking about an unlearned person, because in a certain way he does have manners like most other people. But the problem is, even, a boor we mentioned is a grub, right? In my language. He has no manners. He's not fearful because he doesn't know anything. At least this person has manners. But even if he has manners, he's still unlearned. If he is unlearned, he will not be pious. There is no possible way because he lacks the knowledge. Can he be good? And the answer is no. He cannot. There might be good things that they do. Maybe they give charity. Maybe they help, I don't know, they help Granny cross the street. Maybe as Dan put up there, buy him a cup of coffee, right? Help support the Noahide World Center. You do a good thing, giving charity, tremendous. But that doesn't make someone good.
No.
Right? Being someone good means across the board you're good. Doesn't mean we don't make mistakes. We're not saying we're perfect, right? But I guarantee I guarantee across the board, any secular Jew out there, if they want to claim, which they might, they want to claim I'm a good person, right? I could take them and rip them to shreds within 35 seconds.
I know, but
It would
that's
be
mean.
according to what the Torah says, not according to what I think.
Right.
Because nobody cares what I think. It's all about what the Torah says. So them being good, all you have to do is break it down. What's their definition? And if their definition changes generation by generation, then that cannot be goodness. If it changes, then it's relative. If it's relative, it's not absolute. So then, like things in my parents' generation, let's say more than 80 years ago, what was forbidden back then, today is obviously a mitzvah, right? What people were afraid to do back then, even though people did it anyway and it was pushed under the carpet, today it's all out in the open, right? Everyone does whatever. So, okay, so maybe it was fake back then and people were still doing the same terrible things, that people are doing today, just people that know about it, right? Today it's much more in the open, but if things change and the parents are acting no better than their children, right? That is the curse in the Torah. That is the curse that the children are going to pay for the sins of the parents. Now, someone's going to say, but the child didn't do anything wrong, right? The child didn't do anything wrong, right? So how does that curse apply? The curse applies if they go in the same wrong direction the parents, as the parents are doing. So you're going to say, but why am I punished? That's the way I grew up, right? I went to university, so I'm as open-minded till my brains fall on the floor, right? So I went through all these things. Why do I have to pay the price? I'm my own individual. Why do I have to pay the price for them? Because you're still doing the same stupid things they did. You're going in their values which go against the Torah. The curse does not apply if a person goes against what they did for the better. In other words, if they don't learn from their bad actions and they become a better person according to Torah, that curse will not apply. Again, does that mean they're perfect? No. Does that mean they don't make mistakes? No. Right? But in the end, they have to be their own individual. Just because they were brought up a certain way does not mean they have to act on it. Now, they could have been abused psychologically, right? God forbid physically, either way. It's going to be pretty bad. But, if the parents, let's say, do drugs or alcoholics, most likely, kids will do a similar thing, right? That's been proven. But they could also destroy their self-esteem, kill them in other ways. Okay, these things are traumatic, right? Some things are harder to overcome than others. That may be true, right? And that's part of what that person's soul is doing there, that they have to be paid back for different things they did in a previous life and different things. That all could be true. That all could be true, but at the end of the day, they're going to have to answer for what they did. So it really doesn't matter if a person's, parents, they were alcoholics. Now, does that make your life a lot more miserable? 100%. Does it make them a lot less normal? Very well could be. But at the end of the day, when they get upstairs after 120 years, God's going to ask you, why'd you do this? Or why'd you do that? So what do you mean? I had no choice over it. My parents were alcoholics, right? Or my father was an alcoholic or whatever, right? What do you want from me? But I didn't tell you to act that way, but you know how detrimental it was? You know what happened in school? You know what the teachers did to me? All these that might all be true. That may all be true.
Blame game, yeah.
Yeah, it's a blame game, right? Now, some situations, a person's totally under onus, that's a different issue. It's not in their control. The question is how far we take that, right? Because someone could say, wow, they did this and they did that, and I'm done, right? I had somebody, friend of my father's, once say, I went to Cheder, I went to a Jewish school, and the Rebbe hit me, and, if that's what Judaism is, I don't want to have any part of it. So, I kept saying that's not what it is. Maybe Rebbe had a bad day, maybe this. And what happened? He kept coming back with the same thing, like a broken recorder, right? Like a broken MP3, broken disc. Just kept saying the same thing over and over. So I said, well, maybe the Rebbe, what was it? It was a blame game. I don't have anything to do with Judaism because of that. So I heard Rebbe Wine should be well once told the story. So imagine a person in 4th grade, he's 10 years old. He has a bad teacher. And everyone agrees he had a bad teacher, he has a bad experience. Right? What does he say? That's it. We don't need no education. Right? He said, I'm done. Right? That was Pink Floyd. Anyone doesn't know. Right? That was my rendition of Pink Floyd. So what happens? He blames it on education. And he says, that's it. I'm out of a job. I'm going to get a job. Right? Says Rebel 1. That'll never happen. He's not going to do that. He's going to chalk it up to bad experience. Maybe he needs help how to deal with it. Maybe. Okay. But you're not going to leave all of education. You're not just going to throw education out. Some people may just give up. They may not want to try different things. Okay, there are different repercussions. Right? But in the end, one second, in the end, what's going to happen? It's an excuse. It's an absolute excuse. So a person can make that excuse. He's not going to care. He says, you're right. So what'd you gain from it? So you threw me out because you got hit when you were 5 years old, 6 years old. You didn't understand what was going on, in Judaism. So he said, I don't want to have anything to do with Judaism. That's called a third and long. That's called a punt. That's called an excuse. You want to make an excuse? That does not mean I have to listen to your excuse. Now, it doesn't mean that's a difficult thing to go through. Doesn't mean you don't have to process it. You don't have to deal with it. But do not make any excuses to me, because that's what you went through. The question is how you overcome it, right? And how you fit in society, and all that. But you want to give up me? You want to give up Torah and mitzvahs because that's what happened? Okay, maybe the Rebbe did have a bad day. Maybe this happened. Who knows? But that's not what Judaism is. I gave you a brain to figure out what it was, right? You chose to go in a different direction. That's your choice, and I'm going to zap you. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Rabbi, I find myself, and I wonder if many of the audience can relate with this, the receiving of knowledge and the understanding of it in order to be able to apply it is not a direct approach. When is the area or that trigger point of accountability? There are those out there that are browbeaters. I mean, because it exists, somehow it's our responsibility to learn it all and to put it into practice. When in reality, if you think like a cell, okay, just a cell, it has receptors, and the cell receptors go on and off for specific nutrients as it's flying by, in the system of the body. And when it finds what it needs, what it's requested or needed, it draws that in. But we live in a world where we're like a cell, and we're trying to understand certain things, and we're looking for certain things. We're human beings, and we're trying to integrate certain things. But when people say, here's the lesson, you've been told the whole thing, you're now accountable or you're damned. I mean, we got a lot of that in Christianity, any of us here in the West that were involved in that. And I know that the answers are there in Torah. And I try to see it more as, we're receptacles. We receive the Torah in order to apply it. But the receiving of it, it's not like, the overloading of a stream, a washing over of water where you're just inundated with so much data you could never integrate it and actually begin to walk in it.
Well, think about it.
So I try to get to the point where it's actually usable, functional.
I'll put it in different terms.
Okay.
I had a secular Jew was in my house, and they saw all these books, right? I got probably 1,500 more Hebrew books, at least 500 English books, maybe more over the years. So, and someone says, no one could really possibly understand everything here. I was like, well, I know people that do. They just know everything about everything. So, no one could really understand everything. So I said, why? We shouldn't try. We should just give up. And a doctor, whatever type of doctor, you think they know everything? No, they're specialized. Right. They only know certain, they're only specialized in a certain thing. Outside of what they know, they could conjecture, right? Somebody, let's say there's a GP, someone who's a GP, right? So they're expected to know about a lot of different things. Now, even if they're supposed to know about a lot of different things, there are going to be things they're going to have to look up. It's trial and error. Take this, don't take that, try this, try that, in order to diagnose what's there. Now, is a doctor in general, use a lawyer as well. Is a doctor or a lawyer expected to know everything? No. Now, a lawyer may have certain books. They can look things up. They have to look at case histories. All these different things. They're not expected to know everything, per se, but they have to know how to apply. They have to know how to apply the law. They have to know how to learn it in order to know how to apply it. Are they going to know, every last document and every last thing and every last case? And no. They're not going to expect it to know that. But what are they being paid so much for, or maybe overpaid? It's their ability to apply. Does this law say this, and that's what it means, right? And how to apply it. Now, no one in their right mind, except when it comes to someone with a small head, is going to explain. It's going to say that by a doctor or a lawyer. Why not? Because they have respect. They have respect for a doctor and lawyer. I don't think anybody, and people can take me to task on this. That's okay. I don't believe anyone's going to say to a doctor, "What do you think? You know everything? Or you think you're God? You know everything?" No, they respect it. That's the difference. They respect their knowledge. They respect the opinion. Oh, Rabbi, you just got your head in books. You don't know everything. You can't know everything. What do you mean? Someone's a big rabbinical scholar. You don't think they know a heck of a lot? They know a heck of a lot. Right? Doesn't mean they know everything. Doesn't mean they know everything. Right? Does not mean they know everything. But keep in mind, accountability is a crucial thing. Right? By Christianity, it's believe in JC or you're frying out forever. Right? So we don't believe in that. Because we believe in repentance. Right? We believe that we are responsible for our actions. See, Christianity is easy. I don't have to be responsible for anything. I just say a few Hail Marys, whatever, and I give it over to the priest, and that's it. I say a few of these things, and that's it. But we have to repent over here. We are accountable. Isn't there a lot of intricacies in the law? 100%. Again, that's why we have to have rabbinic scholars that we can ask our questions to. Right? But again, by a non-Jew, it's a lot easier in a sense where a lot of these things are logical. You still have to know what to do. And even though, a Jew, the Mishnah says at the beginning of every chapter in Ethics of Our Fathers, every Jew has a portion of the world to come. And someone once told me, so I have a smaller portion than you. Well, did you read the Talmud on that? How a person could lose their portion in the world to come. There are many things that a person does, that a Jew does, that they could be spiritually cut off. That is very true. But there is repentance. Right? Not
right.
Repentance is not always going to help. Right? There are certain things maybe repentance doesn't help. Right? But the vast majority of things repentance should help. Right? At least at a certain level.
Now, the only difference.
Yeah, but the only difference is, why did I do what I did? Right? Or not me. Why did someone do what they did?
Temporary
you'll
insanity.
say because they were lazy. You'll say, but isn't everything we do rebelling against God? Doesn't God really have the ability to zap us? He does. If he wanted to, but that would be kind of cruel. He wants to give us a chance, right? So there is such a thing as repentance. For a non-Jew, it's worse because everything they do is liable for a death penalty. And the reason it's much more severe, as we said many times, is the fact that these things are universal. Right? If it wouldn't be universal, something they wouldn't be able to figure out, that would be cruel. Why would you kill somebody? Why in the world would you kill somebody, if they're not going to figure it out? That's cruel. Right? That 100% is cruel. So God never puts us in a situation we can't handle. At least that's what we believe, even if we think we can't handle it. There's a lot of stuff out there we have to know. There's a lot of stuff we have to think about. We have to put into action. And if a person is going in the right direction, they should have a portion of the world to come. If they're trying hard, obviously they're doing things on purpose. Let's say because their evil inclination gets to them. Right? Their evil inclination, they're not doing it because they want to spit in God's face. Not too many people like that. It's all about desire. 99%, I would say, of people that transgress today, there's 13.5 million Jews, don't know anything about Judaism. The majority of them transgress based on desire, not based on knowledge. Because these people don't know anything. I don't care what they say. They don't know anything. Right? They know zero. If they know zero, they're still accountable. They may not be as accountable as much as someone who knows a lot more. If they do certain things like desecrate Shabbos in public, punishment's much more severe. Right? They may lose their portion of the world to come, no question. Right? Unless they properly repent. So ignorance isn't necessarily bliss over here. Nonetheless, you're 100% right. There's a lot to know. Especially for Jews. The laws of Shabbos, we just came out of Shabbos. The laws of Shabbos are, they're multitude, a lot of laws. A lot of everyday laws we have to do. Can a person make a mistake? A person can make a mistake. But if you're not doing it on purpose, doing it out of ignorance, and you have to learn, and you find out something, and you apply it to your life, that's one thing. If you don't learn, you don't constantly learn, as we mentioned many times, then how are you ever going to know what to do? So a person can say, well, it's all or nothing. Yeah, but it's a lot more complicated than that. And the reason is it depends how we did things, why we did things, etc. And, if we don't learn, then a person will transgress. That's 100% true. But why the person do it? Where are they holding? Right? Is it something they're liable for the death penalty? Is it something they're going to get spiritually cut off for? Some of these things doesn't matter why you did it. Right? Person that's a great Shabbos, they don't understand the severity of Shabbos. Oh, you like to relax on Saturday. I do it in different ways. Well, I don't care what you do as a Jew. The rabbis told us what we have to do. Rabbis told us our obligations. You don't want it. You're misguided yourself. That's not my problem. Right? Could be I have an obligation to reach out to you, which is probably true. Right? I have an obligation to reach out, certainly to Jews, right? To, try and bring them back as much as possible. But what's the bottom line, which bugs me to no end? What's the bottom line? The bottom line is you can't necessarily bring them to drink. They could give all kinds of explanations, all kinds of things. I mentioned many times, certain people, I've tried to work with, for a long time and just can't get them over the hump, right? And it bothers me, but I'm not saying it bothers me. I can't sleep. It's annoying. And what happened? They're going to be responsible. They're responsible for their own actions. Now, it could be, God can say you could have done this, should have done that, should have done the other thing. Maybe, I'm not losing sleep over it because they're not willing to drink. And if they're not willing to drink, then it's out of my hands, right? They have free choice. I should, try and reach out to them. I should try and try. But even if I try this, I try that, I try the other thing, and it doesn't go, okay, maybe it'll work with someone else. Maybe they'll never get there. And if they never get there, that's their choice. But they make their own mistake, right? That's really the bottom line. They could have got the right information, right? See, now I'm making them more liable. Why? Because they know, hey, I may be a rabbinic scholar, maybe, right? But they know I'm an Orthodox Jew. So if they want real answers, or they really want to know how to get to stage B or whatever, they know who to come to, right? If they want to. Okay, they don't want to. That's out of my hands. It doesn't mean I don't feel the pain. I feel the pain, right? Because, they're a fellow Jew. You never want to lose a fellow Jew, so to speak. And, it's painful. It's definitely painful. But everyone has to answer for themselves, right? So, the things that we have to do are the same, right? Certainly for Jews and whatever non-Jews have to keep. But there's so many other factors that are involved. Right? You'll say, well, it's all or nothing. Well, for a non-Jew in the process of conversion, that's what we tell them. But they're not going to keep everything. They can't keep everything at once. They'll go nuts. They won't be able to do it. It's overkill. Right? But they have to learn slowly. They have to take things on. They have to change. They have to get to the same place where a Jew has to be. Right? Where an Orthodox Jew has to be. They have to get to the same place. Right? Even as a secular Jew hopefully gets there. But the approach is different. Because the non-Jew who wants to convert, we don't care if they convert or not. It really doesn't matter. We're not out there proselytizing. A Jew we never want to lose. So you're going to say, well, that's not fair. Yeah, pedigree comes at a price. You know what they say? Membership has privileges, right? American Express, membership has privileges. True? That is true, right? So we never want to lose the Jew. You can say, oh, that's elitist, and you think you're better. No. We're different because we have more mitzvahs to do. If we don't do what we're supposed to do, we get punished, we get thrown around like we've been throughout the millennium, right? We're not doing our job the way we should, right? But it doesn't matter. We just give up. We don't do that. We still keep going forward, right? But a non-Jew, we don't, if they convert, they convert. If they don't convert, someone in the process of conversion. We're not interested in people converting. If they want to get to the real thing, fine. If they don't want to, they don't have to. Right, but a non-Jew has to know what they're going to do, what they're liable for. Bottom line is that what they're liable for is anything that makes rational sense. So if rational sense according to the Torah. So you're going to say, well, that's all or nothing. They have to learn. God is not going to zap someone if they're in the process of learning, right? Unless it's cognitive dissonance. Unless there are certain things they just won't give up. They won't, they're going to keep doing the wrong thing and they don't care. That's something different, right? That comes with arrogance. If someone comes along the line right? I'll put you on a pedestal here. You want to do the
don't
right.
do that. I'm not there yet.
I know. I might regret this. I really might regret this. But, you really want to do the right thing. You want to go in the right path. You make mistakes. We all make mistakes, right? Some of the
Often,
mistakes
far too often.
Some of the mistakes could be more egregious than others, right? But even if you make a mistake, even, God forbid, for a non-Jew to be liable for the death penalty, you better repent on the spot. You better feel bad. You better have remorse. You better work on, getting to the next stage where you don't get to this again. But again, we can make mistakes. We can do it again, do it a third time. We have to be careful. But it's not all about, I'm just going to fry in hell forever. There are myriad of circumstances we go through. Sometimes it could be onus that we're stuck in a certain situation. And because we're stuck in a certain situation, there's nowhere to go, right? In other words, the person can be in a situation. The only question is how much damage they're going to do. Damage control. I can tell you I've been in certain situations. No one should have to go through any of this. But I've been in certain situations where it's either, okay, how angry is the person going to get? If you do this, which you have no choice. I'm not going to go into details, but let's say you have no choice in this case. So person for sure is going to get offended. The only question is how much damage is done. Right? So you have to try and soften the blow. Right? You have to say there's nothing personal. Right? It's not a personal vendetta. If I could, I would, this, that. But that person's going to get ticked off. They're going to be very upset. So in that circumstance, I'm under onus. There's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do over here. I can try and soften the blow. That's all I can do. I can't do more than that. But if it's out of my control, and I'll use myself as an example, and I get slammed for it, and then people say, oh, Orthodox Jews this, and the Torah that, and they start saying all kinds of negative things. Okay. You have to sit there and take it. You're not going to defend it because they're not listening. But in the end, did I do anything wrong? If I have the backing, of my rabbis, and they tell you, okay, this is what you have to do. It doesn't matter what they say. They yell, they scream, they jump up and down. I'm in a bad situation. Been in a lot of them. Some of them I did myself. But I'm saying the ones I didn't do myself, this is what the Torah says. These are what the repercussions are. That's it. I can't do anything else. There is no way to squirm out of it. There is no way to make nice over here. There isn't. The only question is, how ticked off is the person going to be? Right? That is essentially the whole thing. So if I'm in a losing situation, then obviously God's going to take that into consideration. You're making the person feel bad. Then they're speaking badly against you, causing them that. There are other things. There are other things going on over here. But again, if the Torah is true, this is what the rabbis tell me to do. I'm exempt. I should be exempt. Maybe I should be more sympathetic, whatever. But, this is what I have to do. You don't like it. And I told this to a number of people. You don't have to like it. But this is what the Torah says. You can't prove me otherwise. And that's where the conversation ends. I said, if the Torah is true, this is what I believe. So the rabbis tell us to do. That's it. You don't like it, prove me where it's wrong. But they're not going to get in that conversation. This, that. They'll go on to other things. They'll just blow it off. Yeah. Right? But, so you're in a bad situation. Now, if you're in a bad situation, is that your fault? It's not necessarily your fault over here. Like I said, I've been in situations. The only question is how much damage it causes. There's no way to squirm out of it. You cannot, in my language, you cannot turn the Torah into a pretzel.
No.
If there's a leniency you can rely on, it's one thing. If it's something no one relies on ever, but
flagrant.
There are certain circumstances. There are certain circumstances where maybe you can rely on it. That's when you got to speak to someone big. That's when you have to go to a real, true Torah giant. They could say yay or nay. Say, no, you can't rely on this. No, you can't do this. No, etc. So, okay, but if they don't give you leeway, they don't give you leeway. And that's it. But you got to do what the Torah says. You have to stay within certain parameters. And even if you stay in certain parameters, I can tell you from personal experience staying in person in these type of parameters could get you spit on. Could absolutely get you spit on because they're gonna say, "Oh, the Torah's this. I can't believe. How can they do this against non-Jews? It's not right. It's not this. It's not that." Okay, there's always certain things you can do. Oh, you should be like this. Oh, you should be more open-minded. Oh, really? Does that work? No, it doesn't work. Right? They can't pass it down. So why should I be like that? No, you got to be more. Forget it. This is it. This is what this is what the rabbi told me to do. This is what I'm doing. You like it? Fine. You don't like it? I shrug my shoulders. You want to hate Judaism because of it? You're going to say, because of you, I hate Judaism more. It's not my responsibility. It's not my responsibility. Again, I can try and soften the blow. I can try, say, listen, it's not personal. Not trying to do anything personal. It doesn't matter. You lose. You lose the argument 100% of the time. So what are you going to do? Not do what the Torah says? Rabbi gives you advice. He says this is what you have to do. Even if it's hard, even if you get spit on, you got to be strong. You absolutely have to be strong. And again, I've been put in bad situations, right? Just because they're bad situations.
Right.
It wasn't, some things, again, I might have caused myself. I don't have a question on that. But if I didn't cause it myself and I'm put in a bad situation, that's the situation I'm put in. Right? Now, this is a major test. Right? Why is it a major test? Because you're the only one that represents Torah. If you're the only one who represents Torah, they're not going to understand. They're not interested in understanding. They're going to throw you, your rabbi, and everybody else under the bus. Why are they going to do that? Because I can't believe the Torah says this is discrimination, this is this. Okay, but that's what the Torah says.
They don't see it clearly, of course.
They're not going to see it clearly because they have biases. They don't want to be told.
I can't imagine I see everything clearly, Rabbi.
It doesn't matter, but the point is, in an argument like this, you will never win. The Torah looks bad, right? The Torah definitely looks bad. But you know what? The Torah looks bad because we're anti-pig. Torah looks bad, we're anti-shrimp. Torah looks bad, maybe we're anti-non-Jews, right? In many ways. A million things. The Torah makes us look bad. But you know why it makes us look bad? Because of the perspective of the people looking at it.
Well, if you're coming from
a 21st century transgender feminist outlook, right? So a lot of things in Torah are not going to fit the way you look at the world.
No.
Okay? So that means my job is a lot harder, right? I have to re-squeegee everyone's brains, brainwash them in a good way. So that's not a bad thing. Definitely not a bad thing. We could always use our brains to be, to be redone over here. To think about what the Torah wants. But there are plenty of people out there that are not interested. They have an agenda. When you have an agenda and someone is throwing all these things at you, as I mentioned a number of times about answering people's questions, you cannot answer an agenda. In agenda, there are no answers. Why? Because they're not asking questions.
That's right.
Right? They're telling you Judaism is sexist. Judaism is against women. So what's the answer we always say? Oh. And Judaism, is against non-Jews. Oh. Judaism, so why do you keep saying no? Because you haven't asked me a question. You have an agenda. You want to show that it's bad, that it's bad. If I were to ask you, I think Judaism is sexist because of this, that, and the other thing, what would you say? Okay, that's a question. That's not an agenda. I cannot answer an answer with an answer. So you have to see where they're coming from. And most people, where are they coming from? An agenda. So it doesn't matter what you say. So it's a waste of time to even get in these conversations, which I've done on a number of occasions. Yeah, it is a waste of time, right? In my case, dealing with Jews, trying to bring them back, trying to get them think a little bit, whatever, in some way, right? That's my rationale. Am I going to change them? Probably not. Is something eventually going to go off in their head? Maybe one day, but the problem is they're so far steeped in. If they're intermarried, it means their life's a travesty of a mockery of a sham, right? If that is the case, they're not interested in listening, because then you just destroyed them. You totally destroyed them. So it doesn't matter what you say, right? But in the end, it doesn't matter. We still don't have to try. Yeah. But if a person knows the other person's not going to listen, we just learned in this week's Parsha. Parshas Kedoshim, the Torah says, there's an obligation to give rebuke to your people. What do I say to your people? To knock out people that are going to say, see, got to give rebuke to the Christians. Who? First of all, that's not what the Torah says.
That's right.
Right? The Torah is very clear. Right? The Karaites will be very happy. Right? Karaites don't believe in oral law. I'm not even talking oral law. The Torah says your people. Right? That means I have an obligation to give rebuke to Jews. Now, what if you know they're not going to listen? So maybe I don't have an obligation. Right? Or maybe we don't know how to give rebuke. So maybe giving rebuke is a waste of time. There are certain things, as my Rebbe would say, you have to give rebuke even if no one's going to listen. Because you don't want to get upstairs after 120 years. God's going to say, why don't you give rebuke over here? Because no one's going to listen. Right? God's going to say, how do you know? Right? Maybe you have to defend me anyway, even if no one's going to listen. Right? Because if you don't, even if nobody's going to listen, maybe you pay the price for that. Right? Maybe. Right? So, but that only applies to Jews. I have to be out there chastising Christians. I don't have to do that. That's not my job. Right?
Yeah.
Bringing a non-Jew closer to his mitzvahs, again, it's not my job. If they come to me, they want to learn, these things are obvious, it's one thing. But I have to sit there and be out there and chastise the Christians. I'm sorry. That's not my obligation. Right?
Rabbi, I had an 18-year-old, who was just like you're explaining. He was not asking questions. He was actually questioning and more or less trying to get across an agenda. And, it got to the point where I had to actually block the person. And I tried to give him ample warning. And he says, I'm just rebuking you. You should be thankful. And I just shook my head. It's like, you just can't have a conversation with somebody like that. No matter what. It's almost like picking a fight. And they, just starting and won't stop. But Rabbi, could you wrap this up? Because I hate to close early. It's just, I have to re-upload everything for my next class, and it's going to take me a while. And I do not want to, run into this snag again. I apologize. It's my issue. I tried to clear some hard drive space, and I got rid of something I shouldn't have, and I had to scramble to put this scene together.
You would know CG if it hit you in the face. So
Oh,
you
Rabbi,
better get this stuff right.
I lost a bunny today. I got no bunny. I don't have the transition. I don't even have your. Your website lower third up, and I'm like,
I hope we're still recording there. So I will wrap up just saying, that when it comes to rebuke, the Christians, or forget the Christians, other people out there say it's my job to rebuke everybody. It's not true. First of all, the Torah says it's only my people. But even if you would say that, they're not going to listen. You're going to antagonize them. That was the thing people had against Rabbi Meir Kahana. Shem should avenge his blood. That's why the rabbis didn't like him, because he was a rabble-rouser, right? He was in people's faces, and that's not the way to do it, right? That's what the rabbi said. It's not the way to do it. So I should sit there and be a rabble-rouser against the Christians, and that's their own fault. They believe in all this garbage. They want to come to me and ask questions, one thing, right? But that is a crucial thing. They have to know. They absolutely have. A person has to know when someone's coming with an agenda and someone's coming with a legitimate question. If they're coming with an agenda, then okay. I told the story earlier, so I guess I'll end with one story. That I was telling the story that, a 13-year-old kid, 14-year-old kid's in yeshiva, one of the rabbis is telling him something. He's like, "Oh, Rabbi, that's nice. I have a different opinion." He said, so when the rabbi looks at him, he's 14 years old. He goes, "You're too young to have an opinion." It's like, you're too young to have an agenda over here, right? If a people in general would eat a little bit of humble pie, and they would know, one day we're going to get to the, in a couple of missions, you have to know your place. You have to know your place. You have to show respect. You have to have humility, right? People say, "Oh yeah, you should be happy." I'm shredding you to pieces. Why should I be happy over here? You have an agenda. You're not listening, right? If you're not listening, you're not giving me muster because we're not on the same page. You have an agenda. You haven't heard one thing I said. So that's it, right? So, if a person's willing to be humble, you can deal with them. If they're not willing to be humble, they have their own opinions, even though they don't know very much. You have to know when to walk away. And there are times where, I learned this the hard way, right? And you just have to know when to walk away to know that banging your head against the wall till it bleeds is bad. I don't have to do that. Because if they have an agenda, you're not getting anywhere. That's, that's really the bottom line. And give Dan some slack over here. He works very hard. Doesn't really matter. We have to end a little bit early over here. He works very hard. He should be supported, and we're going to continue with this mission next week.
I really
there
hope
is plenty what to say. We're going to see chapter 2, Mishnah 6, part 3.
So next week. Are we on for next week?
Is going out a little bit later, but we're still good for the same time. We still should be good for the same time next week.
Well, I'm going to make sure 100% I don't do any updates or clearing of spaces prior to the broadcast. It's so hard. Sometimes I can spend hours behind the scenes early, Rabbi, just to make sure it goes off fine. Some days, though, it's as smooth as butter and silk, and it just goes. Because I know how hard you rabbis have studied, but more than that, just studied. Prepared to do these wonderful lessons. I'm so grateful. Not that I could fathom the depth of it, but it's a joy to learn more from you and have the light of Torah out of the nation of Israel. So I got to sign off, folks, so I can get my new next show ready. So till next week, Hashem willing, have a wonderful, wonderful week, folks.